Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, I like and appreciate a lot English language, but I love Polish language, which epitomizes more than 1,000 years of Polish heritage, Polish culture and Polish history, so I would like to share with you Polish language. Szanowny
Distinguished Mr. President, Your Excellencies, esteemed delegates, I am standing here for the first time as President of the Republic of Poland. And of course, I feel great proud because of this. But at the same time, I'm aware of what serious challenges we are facing today as an international community. This is indeed so, for the world has changed completely over the last couple of years since the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. On February the 24th, 2022, we were brutally, all of us, awakened from our blissful dream of a world at the end of history. The history did not finish, and the history will not finish, and we need to be aware of that. So we were awakened from our blissful dream in which we strive for universal peace and respect for the principles of international law. I believe these are the words which are repeated more frequently in this community. This dream, ladies and gentlemen, does no longer exist, and we often repeat the words which do not reflect reality which surrounds us, both in Central Europe, in Eastern Europe, and in many other regions of the world from which you have come. State borders have ceased to be untouchable, as a matter of fact, and international law, which has so far been considered the compass of the world order, began to be treated more as a suggestion rather than a rule. Let me remind you that shortly after the outbreak of the war and the attack of the Russian Federation on Ukraine, Polish men and women demonstrated incredible solidarity with the fighting Ukrainian nation. We opened our hearts, our borders, we opened up our homes. We provided material, financial, and military assistance, as well as diplomatic one. Today, ladies and gentlemen, 1 million Ukrainian refugees live in Poland. Ladies and gentlemen, the Russian invasion of Ukraine is not only the most serious conflict in Europe since World War II, but it is also a turning point. The existing international order is crumbling before our eyes. The world has entered a new and dangerous era of rivalry between great powers, breaking rules and testing how far one can go before someone says a clear enough stop. The principle of sovereignty, you can ask this question. It is increasingly trampled upon, the prohibition of aggression reduced to a dead letter. Instead of law, an attempt to use naked and brutal force. We are at a turning point in history, a time when the decisions made today will have consequences for decades to come. And all of us need to be aware of this, and all of us are taking responsibility for this. That is why now, as a community of democratic states, or those aspiring to be democratic states, we must view the current situation as a battlefield for principles whose observance may determine the future of our civilization. Ladies and gentlemen, I think this is the last moment to take concrete action. Ladies and gentlemen, Russia's aggression against Ukraine is not just a regional conflict. It is a test of whether the principles on which the UN is based will stand the test of time, or whether they will succumb to the weight of the imperial and colonial ambitions of a state which considers itself above the law and which has repeatedly ignored the resolutions of the assembly, of this assembly, of other assemblies, and to a certain extent, all of us take responsibility for that. Further repeating the words about peace and security, which have to be spoken out loud, but which should be followed by concrete action. Moscow speaks of the need to address, and I quote, the root causes of the conflict. I share this view, but I believe that the root causes of Russian aggression are primarily ideological. Russia refers to an imperial vision that treats entire nations as a colonial property. It denies them subjectivity on a regular basis, claiming that they are artificial constructs, and it justifies the invasion as a historical correction. And ladies and gentlemen, in Poland, in Central Europe, in Eastern Europe, we know all of that. We have known it for at least 86 years. It is the same set of notions which appears also in the 21st century during our discussions, plenary sessions, and assemblies. To us in Central Europe and in Eastern Europe, this set of notions is nothing new. Whether we are talking about Poland, the Republic of Poland, in the first half of the 20th century, or whether we are talking about Ukraine today. As a historian, I view the present also through the lens of the past. That is natural. After centuries of conquests, wars, partitions, deportations, rapes, and crimes, in the 20th and in the 21st century, Russia has simply not abandoned its imperial ambitions. One of my great predecessors, the late President Lech Kaczyński, understood this perfectly well when he spoke in front of the Georgian parliament in 2008. His words, spoken at that time, have stood the test of time. President Lech Kaczyński said, ladies and gentlemen, today Georgia, tomorrow Ukraine, the day after tomorrow the Baltic states, and later, perhaps, it will be time for my country, for Poland. When Russia attacked Georgia, it was not clear to everyone that this was only the beginning of the Kremlin's new imperialism. Unfortunately, the wind of history, which we know and understand so well in Poland, is beginning to blow again. Once again, we are experiencing Russian imperialism also on our soil, in Poland. 2 weeks ago, on the night of September 9th to 10th, the Russian drones attacked the territory of a NATO member state, on the territory of Poland. A dozen or so drones violated my country's borders deliberately, because I assure you, ladies and gentlemen, that this was not a coincidence. It happened on orders issued in the capital of a country which is a permanent member of the Security Council. As a result, for the first time since World War II, Poland was forced to open fire on hostile objects over our territory. And rest assured, ladies and gentlemen, as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces and as President of Poland, that Poland will always react adequately and it stands ready to defend its territory. Poles, ladies and gentlemen, were not scared of the Soviets in 1920, and they defended the European civilization. They defended the Soviets in 1920. Polish people and the countries of Central Europe did not give up their spirit of freedom and sovereignty for 45 years of Soviet colonialism after 1945. And Polish people, as well as countries of Central and Eastern Europe, will not be scared of Russian drones either. But, ladies and gentlemen, this is not the point. The point is, how long are we going to agree to such acts of violating our international community? And that is precisely why, ladies and gentlemen, in Poland we're allocating significant amounts to develop our defense capabilities. That is why we are building the resilience of our country, but also of our part of Europe. Since the victims of similar provocations by Russia are also the Baltic states, our friends, the Estonians, for example, as well as Romania. As a leader in the region, we are working to strengthen the close ties among the Bucharest 9 countries. And that is why we are developing cooperation within the 3Cs initiative. As the voice of the region, we emphasize that we do not consent to Moscow's ruthless acts of provocation against us and other European nations, testing our reactions and intimidating our societies. We do not agree to that. Distinguished delegates, neo-imperial and neo-colonial Russia is attempting to destroy the architecture of international security before our eyes. It violates international law, reinforces divisions, and strives to revive the concert of powers. Many countries present in this hall today are well aware of the tragedy of borders drawn by force and decisions taken over the heads of nations. Historical experiences, often so difficult for my country, shows that lasting peace cannot be built on rewarding aggression. We cannot agree to territorial integrity and sovereignty being violated. Russia's current actions do not indicate a willingness to pursue genuine peace, declarations of dialogue, and this is something we know as well, are accompanied by military offensives and more attacks, with victims being civilians, including children. Always when Moscow says peace, what it actually means is surrender of the one who it considers its enemy. Russia needs to end the war and accept full responsibility for it. Holding Russia accountable should be our common duty. The perpetrators of all international crimes must be tried before competent courts. And I hope this is going to be the case soon, and that we are going to meet in the coming years, also during my presidency, and discuss things which should be obvious for all of us. That is why Poland supports the work of the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court, and endorses the idea of establishing a special ad hoc tribunal to try the perpetrators of aggression.